Welcome to the night section. So today I was inspired by recent discussions about Tyler the Creator with his recent album drop titled Call Me If You Get Lost, which is an incredible album, by the way. Chef's Kiss. Shout out to DJ Drama and the work that he did on this. It really gave us his Gangsta Grillz mixtape era vibes with the samples as well as his own performance. And obviously Tyler the Creator made it what it was with his performance, the different flows and his signature style. It was an adventure with that album, and I recommend you guys all listen to it if you haven't already after this video. But to get back on track, I think it's time that we actually acknowledge Tyler the Creator and everything he's contributed to the game. Now, he's been in the game for more than a decade now and has shown us proof of concept. In other words, he's the real deal. But in many ways, I still think he's underrated and deserves way more credit than he's received, especially in more recent times. But before we get into it, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and hit the bell notification if you'd like to see more content like this. And of course, don't hesitate to comment. I'd love to know what you think. Now, when we talk about people being underrated, at least in the mainstream sense, it's not necessarily about album sales or even awards. It's about the opinion and validation of the overall culture. In a clip at the beginning, we hear Ice from the Joe Budden podcast basically say, and this is not verbatim, but he's basically saying that he thinks that Tyler the Creator is up to par with J. Cole, if not better.
I do believe, and I know a lot of people gonna give me hell over this, but Tyler is who y'all think J. Cole is.
And it's 100% true. Their styles do differ, but in terms of technical skills of rapping, lyricism, and production, they are leveled. It's your opinion who you personally prefer, but just objectively speaking, he's right. The only difference, however, is that in this culture of hip-hop, we don't praise Tyler the way that we do Cole. And obviously there's different variables that can go into this, like the fact that J. Cole has been in the game longer and has a bigger catalog, as well as the style of music he makes, which is more digestible per se to the more simpler ear, reaching a larger audience, in contrast perhaps with Tyler. If you're not really used to more alternative sounds and more of a grand and exaggerated production, it might not be as easy to get into his music. But the point still stands. I do think that Tyler is underrated, and today I wanted to discuss why he shouldn't be in 3 parts. Part 1, influence. If you're in your early to mid 20s now, you probably had an Odd Future phase. Tyler, Earl, Sid, Frank Ocean, Haji Beats, Left Brain, Domo Genesis, Taco, Mike G, and I'm just mentioning a few members of the original 1000, it felt like. Formed originally in 2007, they really changed the landscape of hip-hop, and this was around the time where things were starting to get more melodic in the music industry. But Tyler and the gang came out the gate really rapping. And just a side note, I might just make a video on Odd Future in general. If you'd like to see that, let me know in the comments below. But to get back on track, Odd Future, but more specifically Tyler the Creator, inspired a whole generation of kids that are adults now in terms of music and even style. He really broke the system and showed us that you can be really successful just being yourself, and freed our minds in terms of creativity and self-expression. A little controversial at times, but it was definitely necessary for the evolution of hip-hop. And I think it inspired a lot of artists, especially at that time, again, to be themselves. And it really made hip-hop collectives a cool thing again. Tyler, obviously being the Beyonce of the group, was definitely the brash, rebellious, outspoken character that our parents would warn us about. But I definitely don't think he gets credit for the businessman and visionary he actually was and still is. Artistic abilities aside, he's shown and proved that he is an incredible A&R, recruiting newer members of the group like a Frank Ocean joining in 2010, a marketing genius with his outrageous lyrics and imagery, especially earlier on in his career, along with the branding in terms of the Odd Future brand and using the Homer Simpson donut, which was already associated with The Simpsons, aka one of the most popular cartoons of all time, which was and still is associated with Odd Future today. I think we also forget that Tyler Creator earlier in his career took the DIY approach, producing his own music, directing his own music videos, as well as designing and distributing his own merch. and he really set the blueprint on how to be a successful independent artist with the use of the internet, but more specifically YouTube. Not to mention, he proved that your vision and creativity doesn't have to be compromised even when you do become successful, because since the release of Yonkers back in 2011 that really catapulted his success, he's managed 10 years later to still have a steady and successful career. He might not be doing Drake numbers, but he's definitely still able to sell out stadiums. And by the way, Goblin, his first project, is certified gold, selling over 500,000 units in the US alone, and Flower Boy, which dropped in 2017, is certified platinum, selling over 1 million units in the US, which was given that push by the Big Machine, aka Columbia Records. Part 2. Talent. Tyler's talent is absolutely undeniable. I mean, he's able to rap as well as produce. Fun fact, he actually taught himself how to play the piano after seeing Pharrell play in the Clones DVD. Now, he's an all-around creative, something like a renaissance man with his fashion endeavors, as well as being a talented entrepreneur, A&R, cartoon creator, and director. But when we talk about the music specifically, he's one of the best to ever do it, at least in my opinion. You can argue that it might not be your style or even to your liking, but how many artists can say that they can actually rap, sing, as well as produce and do all of those things well? Now, he's known for his deep, bassy, and sometimes monotone vocals, but I don't think Tyler gets enough credit for the actual content of his music and the way he crafts his lyrics. He's a lyricist and a storyteller. Though his style has evolved since his first project, some things, however, stayed consistent throughout the years, and that's his ability to use imagery to tell a story, his wordplay, and overall his imaginative approach to writing music. One of my favorite verses from Tyler the Creator is on the song Rusty, the second verse to be more specific, from Tyler's second studio album titled Wolf, which dropped in 2013, and it starts with lyrics, quote, "In a world where kids my age are popping mollies with leather, sitting on Tumblr, never outside or enjoying the weather, can name a sweater, but not a talent or don't know if whether or not they got one, tried to change their life for the better." End quote. And he continues on in this almost stream of consciousness like way, basically describing that all he can do is be himself. In that verse, you understand that he is hyper aware of the world and his surroundings, aware of how other rappers and people in his age group at that time portrayed themselves in the world, and him seeing through the facades. And because perhaps he doesn't fit the mold, he is misunderstood and misrepresented not only in the media but by other people as well. But near the end, we see that he makes peace with knowing that he might be hated or disliked for just being himself. A couple things that stood out to me in that verse is one, him using cultural references for that time period in 2012 to 2013. For example, when he says in the opening line of that verse, quote, "In a world where kids my age are popping mollies with leather," which was a reference to the song All Gold Everything by Trinidad James, where we know the famous line, "Popped on Molly, I'm sweating." But Tyler was also making references to the overall music at that time, which was geared towards, or rather promoting, the use of MDMA. And a couple bars after that, he says, quote, "See, I don't bees in the trap N-word, I bees in the bees." Again, another cultural reference, obviously making reference to Nicki Minaj's Bees in the Trap song, which also came out around that time. And finally, Tyler overall is also a genius when it comes to his creative and outrageous punchlines. In this verse in particular, he says things like, quote, "And B words getting touchy-feely like they reading some braille," end quote, "I'm harder than DJ Khaled playing the effing quiet game." And these punchlines are not just in the song, but throughout his entire discography, which really makes you question how the hell he comes up with these lines. Or from one of his recent freestyles on Hot 97, where he says, "Like R. Kelly's wet dreams, I always keep 16s. If you know, then you know." Part 3. Originality. Now, originality, I think nowadays, is pretty slept on. I think everybody's afraid to be themselves, period, especially with the world of social media, where everyone is basically putting on a show to impress strangers that could care less of them if they disappear tomorrow. But what's quite confusing to me is that the most successful artists of all time, for the most part, were all original, and it's been consistent throughout the history of music. Usually, copycats don't make it too far, especially in hip-hop. Now name your top 5 in hip-hop, and I promise you they all have their own style and way of telling their stories through music. But still, we see a lot of artists, especially nowadays, who are copy and pastes of the Futures and Drakes. And now, being a copy and paste might give you short-term reward, but in the long term, you'll stay plateaued because you didn't have the discipline nor the chops, frankly, to cultivate your own sound and style. And with Tyler, he's probably one of the most original artists I've witnessed in the last 10 years. And when I say original, I mean the art of being himself, in which he mastered because he is, was, and always has been himself unapologetically. Now, when it comes to music, it's undeniable that nobody sounds like him. Even if they attempted to, it would be difficult to emulate because they're not him, and his sound is very experimental. The majority of his music doesn't even subscribe to the quote-unquote formal structure of a song. He might have a song with one hook and a verse, or just a straight verse and an outro. Not to mention, he's not the typical heavy bass and autotune rapper. He could definitely do that style, but his music is way beyond that at this point. He could do and has done practically everything. And let's talk about his music videos. From the beginning, his music videos were out of this world. My favorite music video of all time was and still is Forella. Because what the hell was going on? Mixing comedy with action and mythical creatures. On the last verse, Tyler was half man, half horse, inhaling white powder, wink wink, with a black wig on. And this is what Tyler is known for doing because he thinks it's cool and funny. There's purity in his artwork because you can tell it's just him and he wasn't trying to be anything other than that. Has he made mistakes? Yes. Has he had lapses in judgment when it comes to certain topics or matters? Yes. But one thing you cannot say is that he hasn't evolved into a more mature and refined version of himself. Keyword, himself. And hey, we're all imperfect in our own way. Night section out.